So, hi everybody, I'm Jade Nixon, and I am an occupational therapist. So, just before I get started, just to ask anybody who may have any questions to have a bit of a think about that as I'm chatting away so that I can answer any questions at the end. So, before I get started, to help to think a little bit about occupational therapy, I wanted to start by just asking folks to think a little bit about health generally, really. So, to ask anybody who's listening right now to have a think about maybe the last time they perhaps felt a little under the weather and not well, whether that was a headache or a cold, or you were feeling anxious or had an injury, and just take a few moments to think about how that impacted you in your day to day life. How did it make you feel? Did it stop you from doing anything that you would normally be doing with your time? Just spend a few moments having a bit of a think about that. Human beings, you see, are naturally kind of motivated to be doing things and to be engaging in the world through our activities. And we call those our occupations, from getting dressed in the morning to going for a bike ride to sitting down and having chats with friends. These are all of our occupations. And we need to be engaging in them. They add meaning and structure to our lives, and sometimes our health can interrupt that, and it can negatively influence what we're able to do with our lives. And that's where occupational therapy comes in. So, what is occupational therapy? What am I doing with my day when I come to work every day? Well, our main focus is supporting people to thrive and to live well in the areas of their life that really matters to them. So we're what's called a humanistic profession. We think about what people care about, what matters to them. We're very interested in people's stories and their narratives and their priorities. So when health or other challenges that happen in life impact upon what we do, the aim of an occupational therapist is to support that person to overcome challenges that they might be experiencing so that they can maintain their independence and their well-being and be living the lives that they want to be living. Sometimes there's adjustments, sometimes it's problem solving, but we come in and have a think about what a person wants to be doing with their lives and what might be getting in the way of that, and then to think curiously and creatively about how we can support people to move forward with that. So here's a few examples to kind of illustrate what I'm saying. If, for example, we've got somebody who's had a hip fracture and they've been in hospital and then come home, an occupational therapist might go out and have a look at their home environment and think about how that might be adapted or organised so that they can function with the changes to their mobility and how they're able to move about. So it might be things like putting rails on walls or equipment in the bathroom so that person can still meet their personal care needs despite the health condition that they've got going on at the moment. Or in another setting, it might be something like if somebody's got a diagnosis of anxiety, we might be working with somebody to teach them coping strategies so that they can prepare for an upcoming job interview that they may have, so that they can learn how to manage those difficult anxiety symptoms that they're having to be able to pursue a goal they may have to get a job and to return to employment. So that's a couple of examples. So I just wanted to give you all just a few moments to have a bit of a think about what sort of environment you'd like to work in and what sort of roles you think you might enjoy in a job or in a career. Because I think it's a really important thing to get you all thinking about before I start just talking about what I do, but to have a think whilst I'm sort of covering some of this content about what you think you'd like for yourself. Where do you envisage yourself? Do you see yourself in an office? Do you see yourself working in a hospital? Would you like to be on the go and moving around a little bit more? Do you want to stay in the UK even? They're big questions, but they're important questions, I think, as you're digesting all of this information about the possibilities of where a career could take you. So, where can an occupational therapist be found? So we can be found in so many different environments. And I think whilst we are a healthcare profession, sometimes we're working in environments that aren't typically associated with healthcare. So you can find us helping people to thrive in schools, in hospitals, sometimes housing organisations, councils, prisons. Some of us work in charities. There's really so many different locations and possibilities. Because if you think about it, our occupations are everything that we do. So in some way, shape or form, we can influence lots of different areas of life. There are even some occupational therapists that choose to be self-employed and might work for themselves. And we have specialist communities of occupational therapists that own their own businesses and work independently in lots of different areas. So that's a really nice thing about the profession. We also can have lots of different roles. So we might be working as clinicians or practitioners where we are doing more typical sort of health roles, but we can also be found working in academia, in universities, or in, like I've said, in schools. We might be involved in research, management and leadership roles. And sometimes we're involved in national projects and thinking about agenda and policy and politics and general health and well-being of the overall population. And I also think it's important to recognise as well that we're an international profession, so we can work in lots of different areas all around the world. And I think that's a really exciting thing. In 2020, I moved from England to Scotland and was able to do so because this is a career that meant that I could work in a different country. And I'm really, really lucky actually to have two colleagues who work with me on my current team, one of whom is from Spain and another is from America. And I think that's really lovely. It adds a lot of diversity of culture and experience into our team. So just having a bit of a think about what the skills and qualities of an occupational therapist are. So, I mean, the list is much more exhaustive than this. Is a lot more things, but I've sort of picked some for us to have a bit of a think about. So it's really important that occupational therapists are really compassionate. It's important that we are interested in people and that we care about their stories and their perspectives and what matters to them in the world, because that's how we're going to make sure that we're working on the right things. It's not our job to come in and tell somebody what's important to them. That's something that they will tell us, which brings me on to one of the other areas that I've talked about, which is curiosity. I think it really helps if you're curious, maybe even a little bit nosy, because we just need to ask so many questions to find out what's important to somebody. And to learn more about a person's world and what's impacting them. I think a lot of people can get quite focused when they're not very well on very specific things, but actually the thing that might be causing them the most distress could be something that they haven't thought to mention. So being curious is so important. We also need to be really creative. And it's one of the things I absolutely love about my job is that every single day is different because every single person's challenges are different and the solutions that might be the way we move something forward in their health can be different for every different case that you work with. So, and sometimes the answers we might usually turn to won't work in somebody's life, and we have to think really creatively about how we can support an individual and move things forward for them. We also need to be responsible. It is a lot of responsibility to be supporting somebody with their health. It's really important. So we need to be responsible and be able to do things like keep notes, make sure we're keeping good records so that we can keep on top of what's happening in a person's health. In terms of skills, it's really useful for us to have really good communication skills. We need to be able to talk to people, have conversations, work in teams. You know, we can't support people in isolation of other healthcare professionals like doctors and nurses, or if we're in schools, we need to be working alongside teachers, and prisons, we'll need to be working alongside prison guards. So we need to be thinking about who we're working with, as well as our patients or service users as well. So we really need to be working in teams and thinking about how we communicate well with each other. And then that problem solving that comes from the curiosity is a really important skill as well, which is being able to sort of look at a situation and think of the different solutions that might be able to move a situation forward, and to teach people how to problem solve for themselves as well, so that they can start to make changes in their own life, taking into consideration the health conditions that they may have. Because we might be involved for a short period of time, but if we can empower somebody else to have those skills, they'll be able to move forward and make changes in their own life more independently in the longer term. And some values that occupational therapists typically have. One of the really important ones is respect, which is just respect for each other, respect for people's independence, for their respect for people's opinions and perspectives. They may be different to our own, but it's important that we're focusing on what's important to that person and not our own values or opinions. So respecting difference and respecting the way people want to live their lives and what's important to them is really, really important. And then empowering people is a really important part of it. I think if we have really value empowering people, so that's helping people to be the best they can be and giving them skills so they can be as independent as possible, that's really important. It's not about us doing things for people. We're not actually a profession that cares for people. We're a profession that supports people to learn skills, abilities, come up with solutions so that they can care for themselves and do things as independently as possible. So we're an empowering profession. And then I've added this one on because I think it's one of the ones that always ends up right down the bottom of the list when you Google occupational therapy and it tells you values, and that's leadership. And that's because for me, from my experience in my career, we often think of leaders as being managers and people high up who are quite powerful and important. But I think that everybody who's an occupational therapist needs to be a leader, because we need to be moving forward practice, making changes to the services that we work in, communicating the needs of our patients and of our services, and being able to lead and support people to move things forward and make changes is really, really important. So being able to lead is a really crucial part of our roles as well. I'm going to move on to another question to give you all a few minutes space for my voice. So just take a few moments as well to think about what sort of opportunities you think you may want out of your career. You know, I think we often think of careers as something following interests or what we think we might be good at, but sometimes it's interesting to think a little bit about, well, what opportunities would I like? What would I like to be doing? And I think that can be a really important one. Do you want to have lots of different experiences? Do you want to be able to make a difference? Is it important for you to feel excited, inspired, to have new ideas in your job? Do you want to meet new people and be around people a lot? You know, what do you want to get out of your career? What do you want to get out of a job in the future? And while you're thinking about that, you can have a little look at these very goofy pictures of me when I was a bit younger and my hair was a different colour. And some of my lovely colleagues who said I can put these pictures up today. So these are just a few pictures of me from parts of my career when I've got to engage in some of the opportunities that I've really valued. So there's a picture of me there promoting occupational therapy in a local shopping centre, just to share the news about what we do and why it's important. And in the top left, it's me after I'd given a presentation at a conference and shared some research that I'd done. I was very excited but relieved it was over. There was a lot of people there and I was nervous, but I was so glad I did that. It was a great opportunity. So to tell you just a little bit more about my career, really, so you can perhaps get an idea of what a career in occupational therapy might look like. I've been an occupational therapist now for 13 years. It doesn't feel that long, but it's flown. And I'm currently a senior occupational therapist in a general adult psychiatry community mental health team. Sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? So I work in mental health and I support people in their own homes and in the community around them. So I can often be found out and about in the area that I cover, in my car or on foot sometimes, visiting my patients in their own homes or meeting them sometimes in coffee shops or at groups that they might go to, and supporting them with a range of mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, to name a few. And I also will do things like group work, delivering groups and teaching sessions about different topics related to mental health. And since the pandemic as well, I've also been delivering some of my sessions virtually. And I did that a lot during the pandemic so that we could still support people with their mental health when we weren't really able to visit people at home, spend a lot of time in this headset. So yeah, we've also been able to do a lot of things via video calls like this, which is quite exciting. And really, it's an absolute privilege to do my job and to be able to support people's recovery journeys and to see people progressing and developing skills and abilities, and seeing what they do with that actually is really exciting. So here's a little slide about some of the different things I've done in my career up until this point. So I've not always worked in this area. I've worked in adult psychiatry, adult mental health for 7 years now, but before that I've had lots of different professional opportunities. So I've worked in an older adult memory clinic, supporting patients with dementia, cognitive functioning difficulties. So they may be struggling with memory or not be able to process information as well. I've worked in an inpatient mental health ward, supporting patients who are quite poorly with their mental health and need to be in hospital for a period of time. I've worked on a military mental health ward, supporting people who'd worked with the Ministry of Defence and that had impacted their mental health and they needed a period of time and treatment in hospital. I've worked on psychiatric intensive care units. So that's where, almost like you'd have an intensive care unit for physical health, we have them in mental health as well for people that need really intense care and support whilst they are very, very unwell. So we work very closely as a team in that sort of an environment, and we don't have too many patients on a ward like that. And then I've also worked in a medium secure forensic mental health unit. So that's for patients whose mental health has involved the criminal justice system. So there might be some criminal background and they might come to us from a prison, or instead of going to prison, they might come to a unit that's quite secure, but allows us to treat their health as well. So I've had quite an interesting career in the number of different environments and places that I've worked in. And then there's the other things that I've got to do as part of my career as well. So I've spoken at conferences, I've got to do research, I've supported students. We have students come and work with us in our role. And I've also been and worked with some universities. When I was down in England doing some teaching, so that's been quite exciting. And also when I was a student, I was on a national panel. So I used to go down to London and input into the occupational therapy and mental health national agenda, but representing students. So that was a really lovely thing to get to do. So I've had lots of opportunities in my career, and it's definitely a career that's kept me on my toes. So I'm going to round up with this slide now, just thinking a little bit about how you go on to become an occupational therapist. You know, what do you have to do? What's involved in that? And there's lots of ways that you can enter occupational therapy, and I think that's getting a little bit more diverse, which is good. There's more ways we can get involved now. So typically you always need to complete a degree, and that can be done at different levels. So some courses are 3 to 4 years, some are a little bit longer if you want to do a higher level. But they've also started to develop opportunities like apprenticeships, which is where you can study alongside having a healthcare role. So that's where you're coming to work every day, but you might have so many days where you're going into university. So that's a really nice step forward, really, in the routes into occupational therapy. When you're thinking about your career options, it's useful as well to think about what you can be doing maybe now or over the next couple of years as well, to think about what you want to be doing. And I can't recommend enough things like volunteering in areas that you might be interested in. getting in touch with services and health professionals and charities and organisations and asking questions, seeing if someone's got 5-10 minutes to have a chat with you, seeing if you can visit areas. These are all really useful things that you can do to explore options and to think about what might be useful for your learning. And sometimes it's useful to check out whether or not something feels like a good fit for you. And then after you've qualified, there's lovely opportunities available for newly qualified staff when you come out of university. And I actually did this, where you can go on to what's called a rotation. And that's where you move job role every 6 to 12 months for a while, moving between different places, different settings, different services. And you get to then develop your clinical skills and see different areas of practice. And it's a really great way to get an idea of where you might want to specialise or focus in your career if that's something that you do want to do. Or you might not know where you want to work, so you can go to a rotation and then you can get to experience lots of different settings before you choose where you might ultimately want to end up. So that's a little bit about my career journey and how you would enter into a career in occupational therapy. So I'm just going to move over now to any questions in case anyone's got anything in particular they would like to ask me, or any thoughts about occupational therapy as a career.
Thanks very much, Jade. If any of the school groups have got any questions, could you put them in the chat box, please? I've got a question, Jade, just to start you off. I was wondering at the moment whether there are a lot of opportunities within occupational therapy. You know, there's other gaps in the market for new staff to come into.
There is. It's a great time actually for the profession, really, and I think that's why we are getting colleagues coming from different areas of the world as well, because we have shortages of health professionals at the moment. So there's lots of opportunities in traditional job roles like my own, and in addition to that, universities are exploring what's called role emerging placements, which sounds a bit long-winded, but it basically means that sometimes you will go as part of your university course and work in an area where there isn't occupational therapy at the moment, and be part of exploring what an occupational therapist can do in those sorts of settings. And that's increasingly happening in universities. And one of the nice things about that is some of those environments that are thinking about occupational therapy have a student come and do some work with them, and they end up taking occupational therapists on. Yeah. The charity space is also really interesting in some of the non-health sector areas. So I actually was interviewed for a project I didn't take because it was too far geographically, where they were working with Amazon Alexas. You know, the voice activated systems we all have at home now, and they wanted an occupational therapist to do, it was part of a multi-million-pound charity project to develop new software and new technology that could be used to support people in wheelchairs and with additional needs that would be voice activated and compatible with Google and Amazon products. So that sort of job is out there. I've interviewed for them myself. So it's an exciting time, really, if you put yourself out there and explore opportunities, both within the traditional sector, but also in the new innovation spaces as well.
And what about the size of the OT team in the NHS Tayside? We heard yesterday that there are 75 medical physicists, and then I think we also heard that there were 300 clinical. I can't remember the other ones were. They were biomedical scientists, who told us one was 300. So how many OTs are there within NHS Tayside?
I don't actually know the answer to that, you know. Yeah. I think NHS Tayside is pretty significant in terms of its size, and we have 3 different areas that are sort of managed separately. So you've got Angus, you've got Dundee, and you've got Perth and Kinross. Mm-hmm. So I work in Perth and Kinross, and there will be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of us. In my specific team, I cover all of Perth and Kinross with my team of 7 occupational therapists, but we work in a wider team of nurses, social workers, doctors, but there'll be an awful lot of occupational therapists who make up a really significant part of what's called the allied health professionals, which includes like physiotherapists and social workers and things like that.